Welcome to the Feminine Principle podcast, supporting women to let go of the ghosts from their past by exploring the hidden side of their female psyche with shamanic shadow work for women, with your host, Nicola Lucy. Hello ladies, and welcome to this episode of the Feminine Principle podcast, where today we are exploring the process of separation and integration. And so separation really does begin from the moment that we are born. We are held in the soothing waters of the mother, held in her womb, and in this space we are connected to source energy. We're connected to that divine, universal energy that exists all around us, and that is within us. And in this space we are pure consciousness. There is nothing more to our existence except this. And then when we are birthed, we experience our first separation from this source energy. And then soon after comes the separation from the mother as our cord is cut. And so begins our human journey. And we will experience many more separations as we go through life, because separation really does mean points in our development when we grow. When we lose our attachment to those things that we felt once safe, and we grow into more of our potential. We grow into our own sense of identity, and therefore learning independence. But to learn independence, we must be able to separate at different developmental stages of our life. However, throughout life, we have become dependent on a lot of our relationships, both personally and professionally. We have developed emotional attachments, and therefore we are afraid of letting go, separating from them. And it's these emotional attachments that actually trigger pain and discomfort within ourselves, and yet we keep feeding the emotional attachment through our unconscious and unhealthy patterns. What we're actually afraid of with the emotional attachment is the breaking down of our identity. We do not know who we are without this emotional attachment. We don't know who we are without this person or this aspect of our lives, and therefore we're fundamentally afraid of the unknown, of what is on the other side. And so I invite you now just to take a moment and think of the most earliest emotional attachments that we create. That with our mother and our father. Now, for some of us, we may not have a mother or a father in our lives, and yet the idea of the mother and the father, whether we have one or not, remains the same. We have an attachment to the idealisms that we've created around how a mother and a father should be, and therefore these attachments, which are very hidden within our psyche, actually shape the rest of our lives. They shape our identity and how we relate with the self and with others. Then, of course, we are attached to our ideals, our beliefs, our behaviours, and our patterns created from the wounding and the trauma and the conditioning that we've been exposed to from the moment that we were born. For example, in regards to our unconscious patterns, we will separate from somebody on the external, so that might be an intimate other. It might be a career or a job or a workplace. We might separate from one by leaving one, only to find ourselves manifesting exactly the same energy over again in the next place or with the next person. And so the cycle continues, because fundamentally we have not separated from what is hidden beneath the surface, from what is creating that unhealthy pattern in the first place, which is the original separation from our true self when we were exposed to wounding, trauma, and conditioning. And so therefore, this is where shadow work comes in. Shadow work is the process of being able to separate from that which no longer serves us, to integrate more of the self, to integrate more of our true and authentic self that has been buried beneath the wounding, the trauma, and the conditioning. However, it's not visible. It can only be felt. And so therefore, We have to go through the process of separating layer by layer by layer so that we can get to those very deep emotional attachments which have been completely and utterly hidden from sight, hidden from our sense of being, hidden from our presence, and hidden from our consciousness. Because they have been our default pattern for so long that we don't know anything else. And so therefore it takes time to reveal these deep roots. And it's these deep roots that actually keep us functioning and relating and manifesting in our external world. And so when we embrace shadow work at this level, we start to do it slowly. We start to bring in those realizations. And so therefore separation can be subtle. It's like a piece of the jigsaw that we find that's actually coming together and making up a bigger picture, which makes sense. It gives us clarity. And so a subtle separation can be seen as a behavior or a belief that we're no longer manifesting. We're no longer doing, behaving, or believing in a certain way. And therefore, we feel different. Something has changed, albeit very subtly. And therefore, we have integrated a new way of being, doing, behaving, and believing. And hence the reason in that moment, we have separated from something that no longer serves us. As we start to separate from these surface level triggers and patterns that we have, we then start to get to the deeper level. And it's these deeper level separations that can be really painful because they create so much internal conflict. They create a lot of self-doubt and fear. Now, I particularly really love these separations in my own journey, but also I like them when my clients approach them, which is pretty quickly as they move through the 9-month process. These separations are actually showing us that we've reached a limitation in our psyche. We've reached a limitation that really needs to completely be redefined so that we can step into what's on the other side of that. However, what is on the other side of that is the unknown. It's our potential. However, we don't know what it is because we've never experienced what it is on the other side. Our emotional attachment has been so invested in that way that we've been behaving and believing for such a long time, sometimes decades, sometimes from the moment that we were born, that we cannot even comprehend what's on the other side. And therefore, this is the limitation in the psyche. This is the moment when we have the opportunity to really open the heart on such a profound level and experience something totally profound on the other side, which is more of ourself, more of our sense of identity, more of who we are beneath the surface. And it's when these moments happen that we do go through an awakening. We experience what we call a shift in our consciousness. And this can be really profound, but extremely powerful, but also so integrative because we feel at home in the process. Because fundamentally what's happened is that all the little bits of separation, all those little pieces of separation that we've gone through beforehand, has actually prepared us. It's prepared our nervous system to go through those big shifts in consciousness. And so what happens then is we have an awakening. And that awakening, again, can be very subtle or it can be very intense. But the awakening, when it happens, it's like our whole mind, body, and soul is actually receiving some sort of download, some sort of blueprint, because it's going through a whole reshuffle. And so we can really feel it on every single level, emotionally and physically, psychologically. And therefore, what is actually happening in that moment is we have separated from that deep-rooted pattern. And we are experiencing our integration on a much more vast level. It's like being connected to all the information in the universe, and suddenly we can feel more alive. We can feel more connected because fundamentally we are remembering that deeper connection within the self. The connection within the self that goes beyond our connection with the physical world in which we've been conditioned into. And so one of the things I get asked all the time is how do I separate from an emotional attachment? And this is really such a key question, because separating from an emotional attachment is one thing to read it in a book. However, it's a completely different thing to experience it. Because reading it from a book or from a text, what we're actually doing is just intellectualizing it all. We can understand it. We can understand how it's done and the process. And yet how it is done is so rooted in our understanding of being able to really be with our emotional intelligence, to really feel into the emotional attachment, because it's these emotions which are really broken down into our cellular memory, and therefore we have to make them conscious. But how can we make them conscious if we're afraid to feel them? And here is the conundrum that lots of people find themselves in. Unless we actually have a relationship with our emotional intelligence, we cannot get to the root of our emotional attachments, and therefore we will keep repeating the same patterns. And so having this relationship with the self on an emotional level, it's the only way in which we're going to truly transform our life and how we relate with the self and others. And so, as we've seen, separation is absolutely vital if we're going to step into more and more of our potential. For example, I too continuously go through the process of separation and integration on many different levels. Sometimes it's very subtle, and then all those subtle parts lead up to the intense part, where my heart just opens and I just see a completely different way of being and relating with myself and others. Just like now, for example, I'm going through a process of separation. In fact, I've been going through this for the past few months, where I've started to separate from my identity in regards to the feminine principle, the business that I've created with all of my heart and my soul, because I have invested so much time and energy into it. But what I was experiencing is that I'd reached my potential within the feminine principle. And therefore, by keeping hold of what I'd created, was actually limiting my potential. And so therefore, I knew that I needed to separate from it to be able to integrate more of myself and experience more of my potential on the other side. And yet it's not so cut and dry, as I said. We really needed to feel it, to go into the death of it, because fundamentally that is what separation is. It's the death of an old way of being, of relating with the self or with somebody else or with something. And so with death always comes grief, comes the deeper lessons as to why I was holding on. Why was I holding on to this way of being which no longer served me? Why was I holding on to this limitation in my psyche and not stepping beyond it? And so therefore, being present with all of these questions and really feeling into their answers has helped me to put all of those pieces together, to go through that process of separation, to go through that death so that I can integrate more of myself beneath it. I'm no longer the person that I was 12 months ago. What I was creating 12 months ago no longer resonates with me this time round. And as a result, I've opened myself and the feminine principle to opportunities that I never dreamed possible 12 months ago. Opportunities that now develop my potential in so many ways. And so therefore, being able to go through this process of separation consciously, allowing all of those unconscious aspects to come to the forth, has really helped me to embrace more of my potential. And now I can see that the feminine principle can now also grow. She can grow from strength to strength because I am no longer emotionally attached to what was when I first began. And so, ladies, diving into this process of separation and integration, I invite you to reflect upon the following questions. What is it in your life, whether that be in your personal or your professional life, that you are holding on to, that you're afraid of changing? And why? Why are you afraid to let go? Why are you afraid of changing it? I also invite you to reflect upon the emotional attachments that you have, particularly with the people in your early life. Your family, whether that be your mother, your father, your caregiver, your grandparents, your brothers, your sisters. Everybody that we came into contact with at such an early age has left some sort of imprint within us, and therefore we have developed some sort of emotional attachment to them. Whether that be good and healthy and nurturing, or whether that be painful, unhealthy and toxic. These are the emotional relationships and the emotional attachments that do create our reality and continue to do so right here, right now, in our adulthood. Are you ready to break free from the ghosts of your past, to live with more freedom and a clear sense of purpose and inner confidence? If so, book a chat with me to explore the potent magic of one-to-one shadow walking sessions at thefeminineprinciple.com.